And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Stripe Developer Office Hours. My name is Cecil Phillip, developer advocate here at Stripe. And today we're going to be learning about how we can create AI agent tools at scale using Speakeasy. And I have my friend here, Sagar, who is the co-founder and CEO of Speakeasy, who's going to show us some demos, and we're going to talk all about APIs and SDKs and agents. So really excited about our conversation today. Sagar, why don't we just start off with a quick round of introductions? Why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how what Speakeasy is in general?
Yeah, totally. Cecile, really nice to be here with you today. My name's Sagar, as you said, CEO, co-founder of Speakeasy. Um, Today, I'm excited to be here. We're gonna do some fun demos, talk about MCP and agent tools, the hot stuff right now. And yeah, I've been a developer for basically my whole career. Started Speakeasy a couple of years ago, really focused on helping companies build great APIs and make that process of building APIs
Mm,
easier. We had kind of an interesting start. Started on uh, very kind of narrow part of the piece of building APIs, starting with SDKs, and we've grown doing docs, Terraform providers, MCP agent tools, really trying to help like people do everything around the API spec. So that's what Speakeasy is. We're really a modern tool chain for API development. Sometimes we like to say we help you build APIs that your users love, and now that your LLMs love too. So that's what Speakeasy is.
You know, I'm a sucker for a good origin story, and I'm really curious to hear a little bit about your background and like what made you decide to kind of like get into this API space, right? Like is this your first startup and you're like, hey, this is something I'm interested in, or was this like a problem you saw in previous companies that you worked at, and now you decided that hey, I know a better way and we can figure out how to create a better experience for developers?
Yeah, totally. I've kind of had the opportunity to work on various platform engineering efforts in the last few companies I've been at, everything from uh, developer tooling, data infrastructure, APIs. At my last company I worked at, LiveRamp, we had this fantastic API platform and this whole initiative around helping build out both an API design system and all the infrastructure you need to actually build and launch APIs at scale. And this is really important because if you want to build great APIs, it all starts from like how you do that development internally. How do teams collaborate on an API design? How do they take it to production? And how do they evolve and change it over time? These are kind of tough engineering problems that I got kind of real opportunity to be part of and contribute on. And that really was the motivation for me. And my co-founder Simon has also worked at a number of product companies where APIs are kind of key parts of the business. Companies like Safegraph, Flexport, and so we really came together in this idea that building out an API platform is kind of a critical component to helping companies scale. And that's kind of taken us on, lots of different paths now. But that kind of core idea is the same, that APIs shouldn't be as hard as they are to kind of duct tape together as a developer and put it out. And then as you grow as a company, it gets even harder, right? You have many different teams, you have products, you kind of become a prey to Conway's law, right? Like companies start to ship their API in a way that reflects their business more than what their customers need. Um, I think this is something like a lot of companies struggle with. Stripe, for example, is actually, I think, really a leading light in this area, right? Everyone knows how great Stripe's API and developer experience is. So we really are trying to bring that to companies at scale, and then really also now prep them for the next wave of API development that's coming.
Yeah. As someone that used to work and ship product and work
Mhm.
on some developer ecosystems, I can definitely attest to how challenging it can be to maintain APIs, not just from the API itself, but like the documentation, the reference material, you
Yeah.
know, making sure that all of your consumers have the most accurate, up-to-date information, dealing with things like versioning, like all of these types of things, right? And I can tell you from experience, it's definitely not something developers like to do, right? Like we know developers are not the most enthusiastic when it comes to writing documentation and maintaining like some of these extra pieces, right? So it sounds to me like where Speakeasy helps add value to our business is by taking some of that off our hands. right? Like we can focus on creating our endpoints and actually creating business value, so to speak. And then you all kind of help us with the documentation and the SDK generation, some of those other things that kind of come along with like building out APIs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny you said how people sometimes are not enthusiastic about that stuff. I mean, it's funny, right? Like we build this product, we're passionate about the space, but it doesn't mean we want to spend all our days like doing API versioning or change management. We're building the tool so that even we don't have to deal with it ourselves. So
Yeah.
yeah, completely resonate that with as a developer. Like you want to stay focused on business value. You want to build products people love, and if a product like Speakeasy can take care of all of those duct taping together that you need to do to hold together your ecosystem, then you can really focus on building your product.
And I'm guessing people can also incrementally adopt Speakeasy, right? So I'm thinking, hey, my product just launched, and maybe I want to support 2 languages today, right? Maybe I want to support 4 or 5 languages, and then add documentation and add some, maybe like an interactive developer portal, right? Like I'm guessing we can do that incrementally. I'm kind of curious, out of the box, like what type of language support is there for Speakeasy? Like what languages do you support, and what how do you think about how some of these companies start building out their APIs?
Yeah, very much an incremental story with our customers, and it's exactly how we hope to add value. Um, we support 9 languages today, and we're kind of growing our ecosystem of support past just standard languages like TypeScript, Python,
Mhm.
Go, Java, to more, I would say, non-standard targets like
Yeah.
Terraform is a big area that we've invested in. Infrastructure as code is kind of a huge ecosystem already growing very quickly. Now MCP is Model Context Protocol, another target, so to speak, because it is yet another piece of the API develop experience that companies have to maintain as when they take an API to market. So we've seen a huge growth there, and you're right, people adopt incrementally. It's very common. People come into Speakeasy, start with like the day zero need, right? Hey, maybe they need to get a Python SDK out for their launch, or they have a customer asking for a Java SDK. They start there, they grow their usage, they add on docs, they do a Terraform provider if the infrastructure company. Now we're helping, I think, something like 76 of our customers have MCP servers to us. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of, yeah, definitely incremental growth. And I also think this is enabled by the fact that we're very open protocol, we follow open protocols, and we work off of standards like Open API. So the adoption for your team is not just an incremental adoption of Speakeasy, but also an incremental adoption within your company. So you could start with like a few endpoints, maybe one team or a set of services, and then slowly grow as both your team grows, your company grows, and ultimately your kind of trust and relationship with Speakeasy grows as well. So we very much feel we want to meet people where they are and start with however much of the API ecosystem they want to get live.
Yeah, I can imagine being in the space that you're in. You're almost uniquely positioned to see the trends that happen when it comes to API development.
Totally.
Like I look at Stripe, and Stripe being the business that it is, we can see or we understand what businesses people want to create, right? On your side, you could see, okay, well, these are how people are building APIs, right? Whether it's like an API first approach, whether it's a code first approach, or I'm sorry, whether it's a design first approach, whatever the case is, right? It's kind of I'm kind of curious to to hear about what are some of the things that you're seeing in general when it comes to people building out APIs. Any particular patterns or practices, anything that's standing out for you with the trends of how people are building out that type of functionality.
Yeah, totally. We have such a unique and fortunate position to kind of sit between the API producer and the consumer,
Mhm.
and we own a lot of those, in a very developer sense, those like interfaces that make APIs possible to integrate with. So we do get to see some of those trends. Like a big trend in the last few years has been uh, streaming APIs and powering the whole kind of chat product ecosystem out there.
Yeah.
And so a lot of APIs started having something called SSE, or server sent events,
Mhm.
the way to stream events from server to the client, and very popular with chat products. It's what all kind of the major AI APIs use today. And it's interesting because that was not actually a part of the Open API standard,
Yeah.
and still technically isn't. And so you have to really, so we have this unique opportunity to like help people adopt standards, but then also when the standards fall short, like go beyond and provide something that enables them to still do these things transparently. So we invested in helping companies actually document that service and events onto the Open API spec,
Yeah.
and that now powers SDK generation, documentation. We're trying to work with the Open API governing body to get that into a place where in the next version of Open API, it's something more core to the spec. So that's one example that we've seen. I think APIs are evolving from just standard CRUD to supporting these different use cases. Like streaming is one. I think another big one that we've seen is people starting to use Open API and other standards for generating the Terraform providers, right? So
Oh, so
Terraform is like, yeah, a huge ecosystem. There's, every big infrastructure company gives you a Terraform provider as a way to declaratively create the infrastructure, right? So if I want to like spin up one Postgres database instance on the cloud, I'll use the Terraform provider to state that. It becomes a really nice way to ensure that like people are not doing ClickOps.
right.
Yeah, and so that is probably not something that people would have thought about a few years ago as like being driven off of an API, and now we're taking that further. And now today with agents, you actually have a kind of consumption that is very different. It's very dynamic. It's very contextual, and so as we'll see today, often when agents connect to APIs, a lot of these calls or function calls, as we call them, fail because there is a real gap between like what the APIs were designed for and what they're how they're being consumed. So definitely huge opportunity here for giving companies tooling to go from APIs to actually all the different ecosystems where they're consumed.
Gotcha. Well, Sagar, we got a couple of questions that are coming in from YouTube. I'm going to
Yeah,
pull one up
absolutely.
right now. This one's coming in from Ben. Ben's asking, what's been the hardest part of keeping API interfaces always up to date? How are you solving it for developers?
Yeah, I can. That's a great question, Ben. I think that they are very difficult to keep up to date. I think there's a few different ways to, I think, approach the problem. One of the ways that Speakeasy has gone about it is very much aligning closely with open standards. So we've been very open API native from day zero, and that's because when you think about keeping your API interface up to date, it's often not just what Speakeasy gives you, right? If we give you an SDK, that's probably not the only thing you're keeping up to date. You're
Yeah.
probably also keeping some docs up to date. Maybe the spec is being used to derive a bunch of contract tests. Maybe it's being used to kind of set up config in your API gateway. And so it's really important to work off that open standard such that the rest of the ecosystem around you benefits as well. So I think that's been one key thing we've done. I think another big one has been like bringing code generation and automation to the picture. I think very underappreciated kind of space in developer tooling, even pre-LLM, right? Even deterministic code gen can
Yeah.
have huge kind of benefits when done well. And now with LLMs, you have something that helps you with the kind of design time. So what we've done is we've brought in LLMs to help you with API design and kind of what
Hmm.
I call spec cleanup, right? Like doing those things that people often get wrong during design time, being an aid, and then doing a bunch of deterministic code gen to actually get to very high quality interfaces that not just match your API, but also match kind of what the ecosystem expects. So, there's idiomatic ways of doing TypeScript and Python and Java and Go. And so you want to try to hit as much of that as you can to really make sure people get the best interface possible.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because I have seen an open API spec, and I've seen
Yes.
what it looks like when you write it by hand, right? So for people that do the divine design first approach, where hey, I want to design my API before I actually create any endpoints, and it's definitely a challenging thing to do, right? If you don't have the right tooling around you to help make sure that you validate the you have the right properties set, you have the required properties set, and making sure that you really express the intent that you have planned ahead of time as you're kind of putting some of these things together. Um, And it's also interesting too. You mentioned again making sure that you have idiomatic representations of what it looks like in different languages, right? So like what does idiomatic Python look like and Java and .NET and Go and
Yeah.
all of the other languages that you support, right? How do you do that part, right? Because I can imagine at some point a human has to look at it and say, okay, well, as Python developers, we used to write it this way, but now things have changed and it looks a little bit differently, right? Like how do you manage some of that?
Yeah, great question. Probably one of the most fun parts of working at Speakeasy is that if you're a developer here at Speakeasy and you're actually building out, the CodeGen product, part of it is not just generating off of Open API. Another big part of the role is actually staying up to date with the ecosystem and working with what I like to call like language influencers in the space. There are definitely teams and companies and groups in different languages that have carved out a real kind of niche for themselves and
Yep.
have something to say about the way good Python should be written or good TypeScript should be written. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to distill that zeitgeist, developer zeitgeist on a language into a set of principles or a set of design choices. So it's a long way of saying it's a very subjective process. There isn't
Yep.
like a right answer, and so what we try to do is like make a best choice and then give you a bunch of configuration to make changes as well. So for example, in Python, we've been very lucky to work with the Pydantic team.
Mm.
Pydantic, is most popular data validation library in Python, and it does a lot more as well. And the team has been so deep in the Python world that they're really able to comment on kind of trends that they see. And so we're very lucky to partner with them and work with them, get their input on design decisions we make. We even use Pydantic under the hood. So
Nice.
um, yeah, I think it's about capturing the trends in a way that's like very applicable to companies in the enterprise. So it is an ever moving target, and it's both the fun and complex part of building and working at Speakeasy.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of folks in the community kind of talk about like this wave of MCP, like how everyone's so excited to adopt it, as being very similar to how folks used to look at things like APIs and open API specs and things of that nature, right? Like now
Yes.
this is just another interface to functionality into your business, right? Just particularly related as it comes to like AI and LLMs and things of that nature. What but from your perspective, I'd love to hear what do you think this MCP revolution is such an interesting like it's such an interesting opportunity for businesses to start, really paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's like it's when MCP hit its moment back in I think mid or late February, there was this moment where everyone was asking each other, and definitely I got questions of like, why is MCP getting so big? Like, why are people getting so excited? Like, tool calling, function calling has been around for a little bit now since LLMs got started. I think it comes down to a few things. I mean, obviously the Anthropic team has done a great job, but I really like the way MCP is framed as an open standard, right? And it is ultimately exciting for companies because if you're, let's say, a service provider, someone with an API, and that's trying to give it to the world, you don't really know how agents are going to use this API, right? You
Yep.
don't yet know the use cases, they're emergent. And so MCP gives you essentially an interface to build to and a protocol to work with that now says, okay, anyone supporting function calling in their AI products can now follow the MCP protocol, and there's a client server relationship, something that ultimately like software engineers understand very well, right? Client server is so core to what we do. That bit isn't new, but because we follow that concept, if you're a service provider and you have an MCP server, you support that, you can now essentially unlock huge amounts of use cases and really ultimately TAM for your business. And so that's exciting. And then for builders on the other end, and we'll talk more about this soon, but like not having to, really like duct tape together API calls and how the agent is actually going to get the right tool, or how it's going to, take a prompt, get the tool, send it to an LM, that whole interaction and all the kind of mechanics around it are not something you have to kind of reinvent each time.
Yeah.
So I think there is some definitely analogies to the way like Open API is so great for API developers because it helps provide a standard. And sure, it has its gaps and rough edges, but ultimately having a standard and having kind of open protocol to build to is, I think, a big part of why developer ecosystems kind of surge forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this kind of relates to a question that we have that just popped up on YouTube. I'm going to bring this up. And this one's coming from David. David is asking, we're saying DX is hugely important for human consumers slash developers succeeding with APIs. If MCP is the analog of a good dev portal, but for agents, what aspects of the agent experience, AX, I kind of like that, agent experience, what aspect of the agent experience are most important?
Yeah, great question from David. I think, um, yeah, I love that term AX. Definitely, at first I thought it was a little bit like a marketing buzzword, but then I started to create it MCP servers from OpenAPI and realize how bad it actually was. Like, if you just take the same principles you have for DX, you're not going to get necessarily, function calls that work all the time. So some things we've noticed on AX, I think more than ever, descriptions and documentation really matters. Like providing the right amount of context for AI to make a tool call, and doing that in a way where you're not also overloading it with like too much context or too many tools. It's not too dissimilar actually if you think about when you ship an API to your customers. I think sometimes less is better, right? You don't want to ship necessarily, unless your business has it, like an API with hundreds and thousands of endpoints. If you're a small business, or if you're providing like just one service, you just want your API to do that one thing very well. And in many ways, I think tools are similar. If any of you have played around with MCP and like your local cursor Claude, if you add, let's say, all the tools that are in an API, sometimes it doesn't work very well. So really, this concept of scope and context, bringing it down, I think is a huge, um, kind of very important thing for AX. And then I think all the other things are actually not too different than what you see in current API integration today, right? Authentication, dealing with things like how do you manage like OAuth, right? In a
Yeah.
case where you don't have like a web browser to open and get a token. How do you deal with things like understanding failed tool calls? Why are they failing? So like observability, telemetry, all those things are just as important. I think what MCP does is it gives you like the starting point for AX, just in the way that like Open API is a starting point for DX, right? It's a good start, but you have to like really build on top of that.
Okay. I'm gonna dive into one more question, Sagar, and then I
Sure. Yeah.
think, yeah, let's go over to your screen after this and see what's going on. So this one also coming in from YouTube. Uh, our guest is asking, do you see MCPs becoming a standard offering amongst API providers starting this year or next year? What are some key benefits for platforms that adopt or offer MCPs early on?
Yeah, great question. I think it's already becoming a standard. It's kind of pretty surprising to see the number of companies, you know, putting out an MCP server, and then those who don't, there are a lot of third-party providers as well. I think it's definitely early days in terms of use cases. Like people are putting this out there to see what just to give builders the opportunity to come up with use cases. I think there's some verticals where it's become very obvious that there is a strong use case. I think things like sales and go to market or support, where there's a lot of kind of question Q&A kind of use cases, right? You want to know about your sales pipeline. You want to know about maybe like what support tickets that a customer is asking on your product. There's some, I think, key areas where this is getting really exciting. I think a lot of API providers are putting it out there. I think key benefits for platforms that adopt MCP. I think what's exciting is because it is an open standard, like you could have an official MCP server, but then someone could, go fork it and make an unofficial one, right? Tweak it,
Yeah.
change how it works, much in the same way that, today you could do that with an open API spec on SDK. There's an element of like giving the builder something to work with, but then also enabling them to make changes and really kind of build on top of it as well. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to get in early. And I think as we'll show today, like starting with open API isn't a bad place.
Yeah. And it's funny. I've seen a lot of different debates about this in social media online, and a lot of folks have been like, MCPs are going to replace APIs. MCPs going to replace open API specs, and I really don't see that way at all. Right? I see them as
Yeah,
very much complementary products, projects, initiatives, whatever you want to call it. Um, I'm honestly wouldn't even be surprised if at some point in time, and this is not insider information. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But for me, if I was working on the open API, I'm sorry, on the MCP spec and creating MCP servers,
yeah,
it feels like such a natural extension to just say, hey, we're just going to naturally support open API specs, right? And so every MCP server should just know how to consume, these API definitions and provide tools, right? Because all the context is already there, or at least the context should already be there, right? The summaries, the descriptions, the descriptions of the parameters, all this type of stuff is already there, right? So I would love to be able to
absolutely.
just take a framework and point a framework at my open API spec and just be like, and obviously this is exactly what your business is doing, right? Like just give me the spec and now I'll just create this for you, right? And this is just a thing that we have.
Absolutely. It's exciting. I think as Speakeasy, we're very excited because I think as David pointed out in his question, like just like AX is really an analog, not a replacement to DX. Like MCP is not a replacement for APIs by any means. It is really an analogous use case for really analogous framework for a really different set of use cases.
Yeah.
Um, and we're seeing really a wave of first party adoption. So people who have APIs officially building and maintaining their own MCP. And that's where I think Speakeasy comes in. We can really help you do that very well at scale.
Yeah. So speaking of that, you definitely, I know you had something you wanted to show us really quick. So I'm going to bring your screen up, and why don't we talk about some of the tools that Speakeasy is making available for developers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will take us through this really quick and then want to get to awesome quick demo we've put together for today. Um, So I'm gonna skip here to Speakeasy. We talked a little bit about what we do. We like to give you a full tool chain, right? Everything from your SDKs to your docs to really an API platform to govern all your APIs. And then now the exciting thing is kind of curating uh, what I call curating MCP servers and then hosting them so that your customers can have access. I think many of you have seen MCP servers out in the wild today. A lot of them are like run locally on your own machines. We're trying to give you the tools and infrastructure to actually do this at scale and host it so that way when people want to interact with the MCP server, they're not having to do that locally. They get an endpoint. They can drop that into the cloud or Cursor, whatever MCP client, and get started. So that's what we're going to get into today. I think all of you, we talked a little bit about MCP, what it is, why you should care. I think the kind of key thing here is that it is really becoming a standard, and the way that a lot of these tool calling systems are working. You have uh, kind of the diagram in front of you is just showing you kind of a basic interaction. You have user input, right? Often like a prompt or some other kind of direction that comes in. The agent has access to one or more set of tools to an MCP server. That prompt is then sent with a set of tools to the language model that decides what to do, as well as like what tools to engage with, and then those tools or tool calls, API calls are made through the MCP client server relationship, and then that gets access to different APIs. So that's kind of what MCP is. Why you should care is it is becoming the standard and kind of the way that all this tool calling is working under the hood. What we've been doing at Speakeasy for the last couple of months is really helping companies adopt MCP by taking the approach of generating MCPs from OpenAPI. We've been able to do that for kind of dozens of companies now. The way we've taken this to market is actually by generating the MCP server as part of a TypeScript SDK. So it is essentially part of the SDK, ships in there. We also give you kind of standalone binary as well to run it. And I've kind of linked an example here from our friends at dub.co, a very popular link sharing platform. excuse me. So this is where we started, but what we've realized is that just doing tool generation from OpenAPI actually leaves a lot of gaps. It is a nice way to get started, but there's still a lot of kind of problems to solve to make this something that companies can adopt. I think first of all, as we mentioned, like running this locally is very high friction, right? If you imagine you have tools for all the different products, having to run a bunch of MCP servers on your own laptop or computer to access those tools is just like not really a scalable way of doing it. And it's the DX isn't great. I think authentication is a big gap, scoping access, and then like we talked about tool confusion. If you take open APIs for a lot of products, they'll have hundreds of endpoints. Sorry, I should say hundreds of operations in them, and so that's way too many tools to kind of dump into a context window and let the LM decide what to choose. Often we see they just fail. So that's a big problem. And then finally, I think again, OpenAPI is a really nice start to creating tools, but I think, to be honest, APIs does not equal tools is what where we're ending up. In other words, it is a great way to start creating these kind of first order tools, but there's a real need for high order tools. How do you build and design tools that make multiple API calls under the hood for a particular use case? So those are kind of some of the gaps that we see. Um, I think what opportunity this leaves is really that there is kind of a missing agentic tooling stack for the enterprise. If you think about APIs and agents, what you're left with in between is a whole set of um, things, as we talked about, to solve. And in that, you have creating tools, high order tools. You have to host these tools, and then a bunch of enterprise table stakes to actually adopt them in the enterprise, right? You need telemetry, you need audit. Ultimately, these are all API requests, and so you need great tracking and understanding of what's going on. So in other words, in summary, MCP is like a key building block for agent API interaction, but there's still lots of gaps for enterprise adoption. This is where we get the really exciting things for Speakeasy. We've been working on kind of a brand new product called codenamed Gram, which is designed to help you solve these problems. If you're a company trying to figure out how to take your API to market and make it accessible to agents and AI, this is exactly what we're trying to solve. We like this. We like to describe it as create, curate, and distribute tools for AI, and really kind of leading to those different steps, right? You create the tools, you have to really spend time designing and scoping tools, and then distributing these tools in a way that is very easy. And so all that together is a full platform for powering integrations for AI. So this is what we've been up to. We're going to do really quick demo now. Basically, take you through the platform, which is brand new. It's actually launching on Monday, so we'll have some links at the end to how you can get on the wait list. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at just quick demo of the platform itself. We're actually going to take the whole Stripe API spec, which is, I think, 500 plus operations, load it in, generate tools, scope that down to what we call a tool set, and then actually interact with these tools, use chat as a way to have the LLM make calls into the tools and see where it works, where it fails. We'll make some changes and get it to work. So yeah, let me go ahead and jump into the demo.
So whoa. So hold on a second.
Yeah. Sorry.
You take the whole Stripe spec and dump it into your tool live
Yeah.
on the show.
Yeah, if the demo gods are aligned with us today, I think it should work. Hopefully, I don't eat my words.
Okay, I mean, we have a big API. I'm just saying, for folks that are watching, this is a really big API. I've tried to run my local tools and put Stripe in it, and I've seen it bring some tools to a crawl. So I'm crossing my fingers for you too, right? Hoping this all goes well.
I am too. We've done other things with the Stripe spec, like we've used it to test it to create docs or generate SDK. It is always a great stress test. It's like if you open it up in your VS Code or Cursor, I think it's more than 150,000 lines. It's like a multi-megabyte spec. So yeah, definitely definitely a real challenge.
All right, let's go for it, man. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Cool. So maybe switch screens here. I'm going to jump into a platform. Hopefully
And then could
everything
you
is clear.
control plus that a couple times?
Yeah,
There you go. I made it a little quicker.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Um, so yeah, as I mentioned, this is a quick insight into Gram. Gram is a brand new product by Speakeasy. It is a platform for creating, curating, and distributing your AI tools. And it's really built around this concept that you have first-party APIs and third-party APIs. So for this demo, we're going to focus mostly on first-party. These are APIs that we as Speakeasy, in this case, I'm emulating Stripe, own, and we're trying to distribute to our customers. So in this homepage, for this demo, I have the Speakeasy API loaded in. What loading an API means is you just upload your API spec, you give it a name, and we generate a number of tools. Tools ultimately are basically endpoints that can be accessed, and then they can be grouped into something called tool sets.
And I'm
Uh,
guessing we could just give it a URL too, right? Because I know a lot of folks have their spec on a public endpoint somewhere.
Yes, yeah, URL support, all that is definitely coming soon. It's actually something we support on the rest of Speakeasy, which is something we haven't added here yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so once you upload your API and you have a bunch of tools generated, you can see in the case of Speakeasy, we created 14 tools. These are all the tools for doing various operations with Speakeasy. So getting workspaces, our users, our organizations, all the kind of important information locked up in our API database. And then I've also added HubSpot. I know it's technically third party, but we've tweaked the HubSpot API spec so much that at this point we're using it as like a first party API internally.
Nice.
Um, and then we'll add the Stripe API shortly. But before we do that, what I want to show you is something called tool sets. We talked a lot about how creating tools is not enough. You also have to curate them for different use cases. So in this screen, you can actually see I've made a bunch of different what I call tool sets. These are for different use cases within our own company. I have something called revenue ops, admin, links, operations, go to market. So just essentially different use cases we want to power. And what's really cool is that you can very quickly on the fly edit what's in a tool set. So you just click edit, you can see what API is in here. You can quickly add and remove tools. So adding and removing a tool is just clicking into a particular API, taking a look at what endpoint is available, and then either adding it or removing it. So in this case, the HubSpot has a get user endpoint. I could remove it from the tool set by just clicking here, and now it's no longer available. And the reason this matters is that when you actually make changes to a tool set, that tool set can be exposed as an MCP server. So with just a single click, you can take those tools that you've now curated for a use case, hit publish, and make that endpoint public. And so you now have a stable endpoint that you can distribute to your customers internally or externally to your company through which they can access these tools. And I'm using a Gram domain right now, but this domain could be a custom domain. It could be something, like your company /MCP. And so this is very exciting. Like now MCP is not something like a code artifact you have to distribute necessarily and let people run. It's now these are just endpoints. You can quickly control what tools are in an MCP server and what are not in one. So kind of very much superpower capabilities in terms of very quickly making these servers for your customers.
Nice. There's a couple of things I like about that I wanted to point out. One, I love the fact that you're allowing people to group functionality together, right? Because as
Absolutely.
we think about agents and LLMs in general, right? And
Yeah,
I've always heard that if you give your LLMs too many tools, right, it can increase hallucinations. You can end up getting a lot of misrepresentations of what you actually want to get. Um, but then on top of that too, it also allows you to kind of follow like that single responsibility principle a little bit as we talk about in general as software developers. So
yeah,
if I have say we're talking about Stripe, right? I have someone that's focused on transactions, right? I can give them one set of APIs. If I have another one that's focused on customers and products, I can give them another set of APIs, right? So I don't
absolutely.
have to give them, here's all of Stripe, right? I can kind of have more focused buckets of functionality, which one gives us a better way to kind of organize how our application is structured. So I definitely love that aspect about it.
Absolutely. It's a really nice, I think, really kind of core feature of our platform. And you're absolutely right. Too many tools is like no tools. In many cases, you'll see LMs just fail if there's too many cool tools in the context. This concept of like mixing APIs is very powerful. Like you can essentially remix your tool set across as many different APIs. So in this case, I have two first-party APIs and two third-party APIs. So I could expose all of those as a single MCP. I can kind of slice and dice it any different way that I want. And it really just comes down to kind of choosing what endpoints you're distributing.
Hmm. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of like that. Um,
Um,
recently, I know, there have been updates to the MCP spec. Actually, I think this thing is updating fairly rapidly. So two questions for you are: one, does Graham currently support the I think it's called the authentication or authorization additions that have been made to MCP? And I think those are pretty new. So I completely understand if you say no. And then how in general do you look at you know supporting revs as the MCP spec itself moves forward?
yeah, great question. What we've done in Gram actually is every time, and we'll see in the next bit of the demo, every time you upload, uh, you create new tools, we have our own representation, and then we create an MCP layer on top of that. So
Mm.
we're able to basically support different protocols as they arrive. So hopefully one day we'll also explore something like A2A, right, from Google, see if that is an area of interest for people. Within MCP itself, definitely very fast moving. We added support for custom resources, prompt templates, things like when the protocol changed to HTTP streaming as well. I don't know if we've added all the support for new auth add-ons. I'll have to check, but
Right.
essentially the hope is, yeah, by using us, we'll basically buffer you from the kind of rapid evolving MCP ecosystem, because ultimately you're just distributing an endpoint, just a single URL to your customers. Everything is kind of hidden under that.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Cool. What I will do next is for this demo, I want to take us through a couple prompts, see us actually execute tool calls. Before I do that, I'm going to do the fun bit first. I'm going to actually add the whole Stripe API spec. Let's just see if it works. Moment of truth. I have the whole Stripe API. You can see it's 5.5 megabytes straight from your GitHub. Um, so I'm going to add this in. I'm going to
Okay.
call it Stripe. I'm going to hit continue. And this will take a few seconds. And you should see something like 500 plus tools get generated. Cool. We
Wow,
got 550.
that was quick.
Yeah, pretty quick. And we're going to say continue. And you can see the 559 tools that are created. It's really a ton of tools, right? Like, honestly, there's a bunch of UX we have to improve to, to manage tools that are this big. Um,
We're very
but what
happy to
I'll
test your product for you, 100%.
Stripe Spec always stress tests our product. So we're going to tool sets, and for this demo, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and add in the tools for our tool set. So for the revenue ops tool set, which we'll use for our kind of prompts, I'm going to go ahead and add in different Stripe tools that I want. So I'm going to say, I believe I want the charges endpoints. And I had these saved, but they've disappeared. So I'm just going to do the dumb thing of searching through them really quickly. Believe we also want get charges refund, dispute, charges, search, and just the get charges endpoint. So that's something like 30 tools that we have. Let's see if there's any that I missed. You can see we definitely need search built to manage specs this big. And you know what? I'll also keep the post charges in there as well, just for the hell of it. Cool.
And
So
just really
those are,
quickly, because I'm sorry to cut you off, Sagar,
yeah,
but I know we do have some folks that are just now showing up.
yes.
And so what Sagar is showing us here is a new tool, still work in progress. So we'd really appreciate any feedback that you have. And like Sagar mentioned, there will be a public preview coming shortly. But right now, this is very much of a work in progress. So like you mentioned, things like search and some other functionalities are going to be added later on. But if you have any other comments or thoughts about what you're seeing, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we'll make sure that we address those.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Cecil. Yeah, really quick for everyone joining. Like the product that we're demoing here for is a brand new product Speakeasy is launching, essentially to help you create, curate, and distribute tools for agents and AI that are going to build with your API. So really trying to be kind of, in other words, a tools gateway for your product. All right, so I've basically what I've done is I've added in a bunch of Stripe endpoints into this tool set, and I've kept it to only things around charges, because that's for the demo I'm going to do. I'm really only interacting with the charges endpoints, so different essentially credit card charges that will come in on the Speakeasy product. I don't need a lot of other things in here, right? I don't need checkout sessions. I don't need climate orders, climate suppliers, coupons. That's a lot of extra context that's probably not going to be kind of interesting to, or sorry, I should say relevant to the prompts that I'm asking. So that's another kind of power feature of Gram, is that you can curate these tool sets such that they're really focused on different use cases, right? So you could create and distribute different MCP servers for different use cases. Awesome. Just be conscious of time. I'm going to keep moving here. What I'm going to do is switch over to a playground to ask ourselves, to ask the system a few prompts. I'm going to go ahead and choose the revenue ops toolset that we made, and we added Stripe to, and then an environment called Stripe. The environment is just a set of API keys I have encrypted on our server to actually access these APIs. Cool. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to be using for this demo one of our customers, dub.co, very awesome team. They're a link sharing platform, so they've been nice enough to let us use the name and content for this demo. So I'm going to use them here. The first thing I'm going to ask is I'm going to ask this chat. And by the way, this chat is just standard chat, right? Like for this demo and using this product, you could take the kind of MCP server made for revenue ops, make it a public MCP server and just drop that into your own client. I'm just going to do it in here for expediency. We're using GPT-4o. I'm going to say, can you get me HubSpot deals for Dub? Right. Just going to ask that question. Let's see what happens. So you can see that the LLM has decided to use the HubSpot search deals tool. And I'm going to hit accept. There's a little human in the loop. And it should give me back a deal for dub.co, and basically initial deal, 2 renewals. This is fake data, so don't worry, this is not how much they pay us. And so it's really great to see that tool call work. Now, kind of the use case I want to play out here is I want to get information on how much Dub has paid us and all the charges that have come in on Stripe, right? We have our own Stripe account as well. And so that's exciting, because these questions that we're asking are actually in kind of entirety are going to work through different tools that we've added to this tool set. So the next question I'll ask is getting the actual users in the Dub organization in Speakeasy. So on our platform, different Dub team members can log in, and we have their information stored. So I'm going to go ahead and add this in. I'm just copying these prompts in so I don't have to type them out. A couple tool calls are made. You can see there's one for Speakeasy search organizations. We're looking up what companies we have, and then we're looking up the users as well. There's kind of one more tool call made to get workspaces, because our product has a concept of workspaces under orgs. And then finally we get the users. So there's actually 3 different tool calls that were made to this tool set. And then finally, we have a lovely friend, Steven, and his teammates that have logged into the workspace. So this is what we know about the Dub team. Okay, now here's the fun part, and where hopefully the demo gods will work for us. What we're going to do next is actually ask for the Stripe customer related to Steven, because we want to get information on the charges that have come in. So I'm going to ask this, and you can also see there's some warnings in the middle. These are kind of schema issues that are there. We'll ignore them for the moment. I expect this to actually fail. If it succeeds, that'll be pretty surprising. But you can see there's an error that's returned. most likely there is a kind of tool call that didn't succeed. There isn't a relevant tool. The LLM doesn't have the right tools to kind of link information from Stephen at dub.co to the actual Stripe charges that have happened. So this has failed. You can see tried to make a charges search query for email, and it said field email is unsupported for the resource charges. In other words, if you go to the Stripe API docs, you'll see that the charges endpoints, you can't actually search by email. So what I'm going to do before we continue here is I'm going to go back to our tool set. I'm going to actually update the tool set, so kind of curate the right tool for this call. I'm going to go into here, go into Stripe, and what I've done is I've looked at the API docs, and I know that the Stripe API has something called get customer search. So I'm just going to search for that tool really quickly here. Oh, get customer search. Let's see if I can spell this correctly. Cool. I'm going to add that in, and now that's part of our tool set. So I've kind of updated the tool set very quickly on the fly. So once we've done that, you can see it's gone from 31 to 32 tools in this tool set and the MCP server that's exposed. Go back to the playground. I'll bring up my chat history from 2 minutes ago. And finally, I'm going to try this again. Hopefully this time it works if I've done this correctly.
And Sagar, as you're going ahead and doing that, you updated the tool set.
Yes.
Is there some type of refreshing that has to happen? Like how does the client discover you've just not additionally added some stuff to it?
So the really cool thing about using this platform is like adding new tools into an MCP server or tool set is instant. Like the moment you click add that tool, we now have access to it. So it's very, very quick.
Okay. So I don't have to redeploy. I don't have to revenue version. You just have more functionality now.
Yes, exactly. In the MCP server, you have new functionality, and so this is from the perspective of like someone who's maintaining the API and you're trying to service an MCP server for all of your customers, right? Like the moment you update, you get that in there and it just works. And then the chat window is really we're emulating what a customer does, right? When they have access to that MCP server.
Gotcha.
Cool. As I typed that in, brilliantly, we're running into model error. Always fun with demos. I'm going to try this one more
I think that's a
time.
good opportunity, right? Because other people are going to see this error, right? And so,
Absolutely.
what do you think some of the causes of that could be? And then, like, what are some of the things that developers could use to solve those errors?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's probably two sides to this, right? There is a producer side, which is the API maintainer. Like you want to know tool calls that your customers doing are failing and why are they failing, right? Just like today that you run an API business and you want to know when the API fails.
Sure.
So part of Gram is we're giving you kind of out of the box telemetry and a bunch of audit logs and things that are shipping very soon so that you can have kind of a full view on like the tool calling that is happening when the tool calls fails, and then also things like model combinations of tools and models, right? Sometimes tool calling doesn't work with certain models. Some models do better with less or more tools. So there's all these kind of product decisions that you need to be aware of. So that's some of the things we're doing. Just to kind of see if I can get this going. I do have a chat from earlier today that was working, so I'm going to just bring that up, kind of show you what the result of this was.
This is like the moment where we take the cake out of the oven and it's already cooked, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty funny. I thought if anything was going to fail today, it was going to be uploading the whole spec, but beautifully that worked very well. So I'll just bring another tab I have. It's really just a chat history, so it's kind of real calls that have happened.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you can see once we added that tool into the tool set, we do another question. Can you find me a Stripe customer for Stephen? The search works this time because it actually uses that new tool we added, get customer search. Right, that is actually an API from Stripe that supports email queries. So that's an important point, and then you get kind of response back. Once you have that Stripe customer, you can say, Okay, you found that Stripe customer. Now we'll say, what are the charges associated with that customer? Let's see if that works. That should give us all the charges from dub.co recently. You can see these are the most recent Stripe charges that will come in on our Stripe account. So adding in that extra tool actually ensured that we could search by email, basically link important context between the user in Speakeasy, the user in Stripe, and then actually find the charges that were done. So that's how it should have worked. We'll have to go figure out why that model error failed, or that particular model call failed.
Awesome. Well, Sagar, this was a really, really, really fun demo for us to watch. Like I was concerned in the beginning because again, we have a big API, but just with you dragging and dropping that over, seeing how quickly your tool was able to generate, all those different resources from Stripe, the performance, the cleanness of what this looks like, the user experience looks like. You guys are well on your way to like creating something with a lot of value for folks.
Thank
For
you.
people that are interested in learning how they can get access to this and start playing with it, like how do they do that? How do they get involved and start, maybe giving you feedback or just signing up to start using some of the stuff you showed us today?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. It's been super fun building this. I think, as you said, we're kind of forefront of MCP and really learning how to help people build successful tools. We're launching this very soon. We have kind of a launch going out Mondays, technical preview, and working with some customers, and we're going to scale that out to more people on the wait list. If you want to get on the wait list, you just go to getgram.ai. There's a join waitlist button, sign up, and we'll get in touch very soon, next week. We also have lots of guide and content on MCP. So if you're building your own MCP server, not using us, or if you just want to know about how MCP works, all the good content around that is now hosted on our website as well. So that's so we're very excited to get everyone on board, use this. Our goal is to really be the fastest way to build and host an MCP server for your API, and then power all those different agentic use cases that your customers are going to have. I think it's really an important piece of the infra stack for agents that's missing, because, as folks are saying in the chat, like just releasing tools is not enough. You really have to kind of curate and think about how people are going to use these tools, and then release the right MCP servers and kind of manage that whole process. In many cases, you just can't drop 500 tools into a context that doesn't even work. So you have to really kind of curate for the right use cases. So, and then there's kind of a really long tail of things that you want to do around MCP and tools, and really build. And our goal is to build this out into kind of a complete tools platform for your business.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Sagar, again, thank you so much for coming on, showing us this demo. We have tons more questions that are in the chat that we do not have the time to get to as yet. So, but because we're almost at time, Sagar, does Speakeasy have maybe a Discord channel, or some other form of some sort, like Slack channels or anything? Like, how can folks get in contact with you and continue the conversations and ask some of the questions they have?
Great question. I'm really easy to get in contact with. I'm Sagar at speakeasy.com, but we also have a Slack community channel where you can come talk to us. If you go to our website, speakeasy.com, there's just a link to jump into Slack, and we're very happy to chat. Also, if you sign up for the wait list for GetGram, that's coming next week. So we're bringing on people as quickly as we can. So we're very happy to do a live demo for you in person, add your spec in, see if it works, even just help you think about how and why you might want to release an MCP server.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. Thank all of you for watching. And this has been another edition of Stripe Developer Office Hours. We learned about, how Speakeasy can help us not only with APIs and SDKs, but they can also help us, start building out some of our MCP servers, which I think, like we mentioned a little bit early in the chat, like that's going to be almost like an expected thing to have, right? Like you offer APIs, we also offer MCPs and other intelligent integrations for endpoints. So definitely make sure you go ahead and check them out. And we'll see you all next time for the next time we have Stripe Developer Office Hours. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Cecile, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks.